Hi there, Megan Thompson here with Megan Thompson Coaching, and today we are going to have a short podcast episode about being easily overstimulated if your child is struggling with managing their deep processing of details in their lives. And this can lead to a prickliness, irritability, explosive behavior. Then this is the show for you. And we're going to talk specifically about sensory stimulation and the environment that you're setting up for them at home. So here at MTC, we help parents of highly sensitive kids eliminate daily meltdowns in as little as 8 weeks. So this is through our signature program we call Boot Camp for Parents. And we also offer a multitude of different services. But what I want to cover at this point in terms of parenting your sensitive child is the key aha moment that we have a lot of our clients go through. One of the things that we talk about in the second week of our work when parents join us in the program is how the environment is contributing to your child's overload, overintensity, and overstimulation. And this is important because if you're a parent of a kiddo who seems to have big incongruent explosions, like their emotions don't match the issue at hand, you may be wondering if your child fits the criteria for an anxiety disorder. You might have even had them evaluated by the pediatrician or had the school identified that they could use some support in managing their worries. And I want to make sure that we're covering this part of the temperament trait because being sensitive to subtleties requires you to notice for your child that your kiddo is picking up on small details that you might not be picking up on. All right. Now, because I promised you that today's show would be quick, we're coming up on the U.S. Thanksgiving holiday. You might be navigating travel plans. You might be navigating packing, getting your house ready for guests next week. So I want us to pay attention to time, be more mindful of time on this episode. So we're going to talk about one narrow focus associated with overstimulation. And this is the concept of visual clutter, right? So one of the things that I tell my clients is that that clutter is noisy, right? That mess is noisy. And when we explain it like this, parents can have this pretty great aha moment regarding the actual auditory noise, like siblings or dogs or more than one parent communicating at one time, TV, right? In addition to that, the visual field being something that contributes to the overstimulation. And so as a parent, you might be wondering, how do I prevent these meltdowns without even teaching my kid skills? Because right now, when I try to teach my kid to slow down or calm down or take a deep breath, my child is losing it. I can't get a word in edgewise. They won't listen to me. They run away. They say things like, I don't want to talk about this right now, or you're a mean mommy. And so when this is happening, I feel lost and stuck and confused and quite frankly, frustrated because I know my kid isn't demonstrating the emotion management skills they need. And so when I try to teach them directly, they're popping off at me or denying the need or shutting down and refusing the conversation. What gives, right? And so when we're parenting sensitive children, you have to understand the temperament trait in its 4 categories. One of the categories that's important here is this easily overstimulated category. This is the O in Elaine Aron's acronym of DOES. D for depth of processing, O for easily overstimulated, E for emotionally reactive, and S for sensitive to subtleties. And so if we're really getting into the nitty gritty here, all 4 of those components show up when your child is overstimulated because they're processing more information from the world. That's D, the depth of processing. Then they are more easily overstimulated by that. If they don't have emotion management skills, they will be dysregulated by the intensity here. Next, if they don't have emotion management skills, they'll be more emotionally reactive. They'll respond more often. They'll experience more emotions. They'll notice more emotions. And those emotions will be deeper in their experience than the average person. The average 80% of the population does not feel life as deeply as your sensitive kid does. And then they are more sensitive to subtleties. So changes in the environment impact them more. Changes in your face impact them more, for example. So when we add all those up, the easily overstimulated can be one of the obvious ones. Like if your kid, one of the things that we see so often in our Facebook group, it's a cycle, and I see this in other people's Facebook groups for parents of sensitive kids or neurodivergent kids. Parents will ask, like, what socks should I buy? Because kids can often have such obvious meltdowns regarding seams in socks. And that can be very obvious for a parent as a quick fix, right? I can help my kid feel heard and understood and get socks without seams. There are plenty of brands these days. And you might be going down the rabbit hole of addressing pants without seams or pants without tags or shirts without tags. There's a whole multitude of options in terms of tagless clothing. And so instead of offering advice on what brand that I recommend, because I don't think that necessarily matters, your kid needs to tolerate whatever clothing you can buy more regularly, what good quality clothing you need to get. And also you can find options with a quick Google search. And I know you're resourceful to do that. What I think is going to be more effective is to understand why your child has such a high intense reaction to that, and notice that does not have to be your forever normal. So the difference between buying a quick change of clothes for tactile sensitivity, or addressing the clutter on your countertops, or reducing the amount of toys so that there's just less to overwhelm them when it's time to go play, and they tell you they're bored less because they can actually see what's around. It's not all piled high and tucked away. You may get quick relief in that. That is definitely a preventative strategy that we support as coaches here in MTC. However, when you're just focusing on that superficial level of environment management, you'll miss the mark in helping your child grow, because what you're doing is you're actually controlling the environment rather than supporting their growth by editing the environment. This is a big difference, and I want to make sure that we dive into this because I want this to resonate with you, and I want you to have a bit the aha moment that we get our clients to have when we work on this in a more pointed way. If you are just trying to reduce clutter, right, because clutter is noisy, then your child will, in that moment or for the week, feel less overstimulated by that clutter. And that you'll likely see a shift in their mood. However, it creates a situation where you are not teaching them how to tolerate messy environments, how to tolerate chaotic environments, like going to a carnival where there's lots of lights and lots of intensity and lots of structures that create visual clutter, in addition to the difference between visual clutter, like bright items and lots of items, like collection of items, compared to lights, which is a different level of visual overstimulation. Right? I just want to make sure we're clear on that. Like if your kid was looking at a magic eye, or what's the word? An I Spy book, or an I Spy image. There's like a lot of tchotchkes in that image, but none of those in that image need to be bright or have lights to overstimulate, right? Just the pure experience of clutter can overstimulate. Then if you add lights on top of that, that's an extra layer of overstimulation. So when we pay attention to visual stimulation, we want to look at quantity, we want to look at intensity, and then we also want to look at organization, right? So there's three different categories, for example, that you need to pay attention to when you're considering the visual overstimulation in your environment. And I grew up in a home where my mom had a lot of tchotchkes growing up. So it was the 80s and 90s, and the decor was definitely like a lot, in my opinion. I'm not a tchotchke or very much of a like a collector anymore. I used to collect some things, but I don't tend to do that. And it is hard for me to deal with the amount of toys that we have in our house. So I tend to prune through them pretty frequently because I don't want my house to get overstimulating. I want my children to learn how to enjoy their toys for longer than 5 minutes, for example. So it is a frequent exercise that I engage in terms of assessing, we have these books on this topic. Do we need 5 of them, for example, right? Because with children's books, I mean, this is the one thing that I have a hard time saying no to, is books, because my kids are, my 2-year-old loves to sit and look at the books and be read too, and then my 8-year-old is an avid reader. So I have to be intentional around going to the library rather than creating the library in our house. But this I want it to be an example, because multiple books, though they're books just strewn about in the house, create visual clutter, and that can be overwhelming. And so, I think I've drilled home the observation that if your counter's messy, if if there's dishes in the sink, as an adult, you're probably going to see that as a to-do list item. That in and of itself will add to your mental checklist. It will add to your stress. So paying attention to that as an observation. We know as adults that if we have a full sink, we can't tolerate that for very long. We need to know when we're going to take care of it and make that decision so that we can, even if we're not taking care of it right away, we can plan for the calm satisfaction we will experience of having a clean sink, for example, right? So it's a mental decision and a process, a thinking process that we work our way through in order to plan for future comfort. And that allows us to tolerate the mess. And as a parent of a young kid, I'm not going to say, come up here and preach perfection, because I often have a very messy sink, and I always feel better when my sink is empty, right? So living life in a balanced way is necessary, but I also have the skill sets, and we teach our clients these skill sets to teach their children to plan for a level of future calm, even if right now life feels a little messy or the environment feels a little messy. And that's important when you're looking at reducing the amount of intensity your child is having or having to experience in any given moment. Like I said, if you're working to get your kid to, say they're upset that their brother ripped the toy out of their hand, and that you're working to get them to stop smacking their brother, then your job is to help your sensitive kiddo slow down and process their emotions, and rather than hold on to them and explode, right? And in that moment, if all you're doing is trying to teach them how to process their emotions by telling them to take a deep breath, they're likely yammering on about why it was not right that the brother took the toy, likely exclaiming some sort of always or never statement, like he always takes my toys, or you always side with him because you haven't gotten the toy back for the kiddo. You're just trying to make sure that the sensitive kid gets less aggressive, for example. That's just one of your items in the relationship support you're giving to the siblings, but right now you happen to have that conversation. And what happens is you can get trapped in this. Why don't you just take a deep breath? Then we can solve the problem with your brother, right? And what you're doing is you're trying to delay your child's presumed comfort source. Their presumed comfort source is when things are going the way that they want, when they have what they need or they believe they need, right? For example, toy in hand, when the surprise is gone. But when you're trying to coach your kid to release that emotion that came from the surprise of having the toy being ripped out of their hand, the disappointment of losing the toy, the frustration, the anger, and the other 7 feelings associated with the event, then in that dynamic, your child is not having the same conversation with you that you're having. And so this is where you get frustrated, right? Because the kid's not listening. They're not doing what you know they need to do first, which is to slow the emotion down and then actually work out the problem, because it's incredibly difficult to solve a problem from the same energy that created it, right? So an impulsive sibling pulls the toy out of kid. You can't impulsively try to work it out in that moment. Somebody has to be feeling more calm than necessary. And if your child isn't capable at this current moment, don't take this the wrong way when I say capable, meaning that's a permanent decision. That's not what I mean. But if your child doesn't have the skill set to take your coaching in the moment, then you need to observe the first step of breaking out of the meltdown cycle, which is noticing that the meltdown at that time, or the aggressive moment, outburst moment, when your child is exclaiming frustration, is not the time to be teaching them how to use calming strategies. And that's stage one. This is probably something that you've heard before. It's something we've been coaching our clients on for years. And now with social media being way more available, with all these little snippets, that whole "this is not a teachable moment" construct is something that you've probably heard before. And the question is, okay, but when do I teach my kid to manage their emotions, right? So I want us to bring us back to the original conversation. If you're just working on trying to reduce the intensity and reduce the clutter, your child will likely have an easier time having these conversations with you about being calm and taking a deep breath, because the noise in their peripheral vision and in their current visual field has been reduced. You might think that that's a sign that they are more likely to receive your coaching in the moment, and you might just notice that they're more receptive to the conversation in that moment. So you might keep the plan of teaching them when they're aggravated. And I have to tell you that will backfire. So it is important to break the pattern of teaching your child when they're dysregulated. They will not learn. And this is one of the mistakes that we correct with our clients in observing how your child is available emotionally for learning. This is not just something that they need to apply in the classroom, but it is something that you need to be observing in the home as well. So if your child is emotionally dysregulated, they're not picking up on your advice, and they're also not going to pick up on what the teacher is covering in school. So this is a skill that can be generalized to different avenues and is likely stunted in different ways for your sensitive kiddo if they're not demonstrating it with you at home. Because if they're not demonstrating it with you, where you can make eye contact and get down to their level and say, "Look at me, honey. First, let's just breathe." And they're like, no, running away. "I don't want to talk about it. It's his fault. Oh, you always side with him. Why don't you go get it for me?" Right? They're just freaking out. In that moment, you're trying to shrink your kid's world. You're trying to do what you've seen on the internet regarding supporting sensitive kids. And while those tactics are very helpful, they're not going to be effective in the wrong order, right? It's like whipping up eggs when in brownies, when you're putting the eggs on the brownies after you pulled it out of the oven, right? So eggs are necessary in brownies and in a brownie recipe, but if you put it in the wrong order, then you're going to end up with salmonella every time. So it's not the eggs, it's not the tactic, it's not the conversation. Your kid needs to have conversations with you about when breathing and releasing tension in their body is necessary, because all human beings, we were designed to take deep breaths. And it's more complicated than that. And I don't want you to stay stuck in the oversimplification of this problem and keep yourself frustrated with your kid, and start to believe that your kiddo is willful, like that they're choosing to not feel better, because no child was put on this earth to be miserable. Your child wants to feel better. They are trying the very best that they can. And at this point, it's important for you to learn something different in order to apply something different with your kiddo and allow them to behave in a different way and feel better. So, just in conclusion, what we're talking about is really reducing the environment. Absolutely, go ahead and cull through the stuff, especially with the holidays. If you celebrate any gift giving holidays in the winter time, now is the time to declutter. Yes, and the clutter is going to come back come the holiday season. So let's not fool ourselves with thinking that that's going to be a long-term strategy. It is a tactic. So the next thing that I think is going to be important for you to observe is learning how and when to teach your child to calm themselves down when they are dysregulated and overstimulated. Again, the highly sensitive person is easily overstimulated, easily overwhelmed, especially when they don't have skills. So Marsha Linehan, one of the leading researchers in breaking highly sensitive people out of the habits of engaging in self-harm or chronic suicidality. This is a common trend for sensitive people who grow up in chronically invalidating households. That dynamic and from parenting is traumatic. And so these sensitive souls who are traumatized by their parenting then end up developing life-threatening behaviors like hurting themselves or trying to end their own lives. And so Marsha Linehan talks about in one of her clinician trainings that I got years and years ago, over a decade ago at this point, that a sensitive person without emotion management skills and interpersonal relationship skills and the ability to regulate their own emotions, it goes through life as if they don't have any skin. And I want you to really pay attention to this, right? Because if we're using this metaphor appropriately and you're observing the necessity of stopping this pattern way earlier before your kids start saying things like, you don't love me, or life would be better off without me, or if they're only saying it but they're not acting on it, like, this is the show for you because this is our specialty. But I don't want to wag my finger at you more metaphorically and say, this is where you're headed, screaming at the top of my lungs in every show, because as a parent, God forbid, right? We don't want to project that into your child's future. It's also true that if you're parenting and this is your first kid, or you're parenting a 6-year-old and you have no family relationship to this problem, like I have my sister's relationship to this problem. I've experienced extended family suicide multiple times. So I have pretty high visibility to how this problem ends up happening in young adulthood and in adulthood. However, if this is not something that you're privy to, it can feel like a huge shock and like fear-mongering from this show, but that's not the objective. I'm just calling it like I see it, and we're talking research and statistics here. And so we're going through the understanding that Marsha Linehan designed these skills to get chronically suicidal, sensitive people out of the hospital. That's the evidence-based treatment. It's called dialectical behavior therapy. Myself and one of my and my director of coaching, we have countless hours of clear and effective training in DBT, and we use this in our clinical practice. And I built the only specialist practice working with sensitive kids and sensitive adolescents, providing DBT at the full fidelity at the time of its inception, and ran that for 5 years. So if you're new here, there's my receipts. But at this point, what I want you to notice is that in following and in understanding Linehan's research, what we also need to notice is that chronic invalidation isn't just through words. Chronic invalidation is also through the physical environment that is stressful to the child. So I really want you to and also chronic invalidation can be when you start to work on changing your kid before they're actually ready. If they're not ready for change, if they're not aware of change, or if you're using the wrong change language or the wrong change skills, your child will feel invalidated, even if you're working towards their best selves, right? So even if you notice that they're highly sensitive, but you're teaching them skills that they're not ready for, they will feel like they're not good enough. And this is where the research really highlights that highly sensitive kids can fall 2 standard deviations from the mean on both ends. This is 2 standard deviations from the mean on the unsafe realm with ineffective performance, ineffective functioning, and then 2 standard deviations from the mean in terms of better and beyond their peers. And highly sensitive kids don't sit in the middle. They don't perform in the middle of the average person's communication patterns, the average person's behavior, the average person's functioning. Sensitive people either fall to standard deviations away from the norm on the negative end or the positive end, right? So because of that, when you're changing the parenting environment becomes more positive. Sensitive kids perform better and beyond, and above and beyond their peers. And I'm sure you're listening to this show because you want that for your family and you know your child's potential. You know your kid is capable of communicating strength to other people, of leading other people, of demonstrating compassion to other people, of highlighting their own skill sets and their own needs. And sensitive kids will notice when their own skill sets aren't measuring up. They will compare themselves to other people because, remember, they notice the environment more. And so since they notice the environment more, they're more introspective as well. Highly sensitive people are more self-aware typically. And when I say self-aware, it doesn't mean that they know how to manage their emotions. It just means that they pay attention to themselves more. Because again, they're taking in more information from the world, relating it to themselves. So your sensitive kid is no different. They're just bringing in a ton more observations, a ton more. They're noticing way more from their interactions from other people, and then they're trying to connect the dots to how that relates to who they are as a person and how they can behave with other people in their community, in their relationships with their friends. And they can take on more responsibility than what's necessary if you're not teaching them and having those conversations with them. So what happens is they start to believe they have more power in the dynamic of the family environment, of the friend relationships, or in the classroom. And when they realize they can't affect change, or no one's reading their face when they give that subtle, hey, I need help face that your kiddo is trying to indicate, then what happens is they start to feel crappy about themselves. They develop self-deprecating statements. They start to say things that indicate low self-esteem, like I'm the worst, everybody hates me, nobody's my friend, even if they have friends, right? And so they start to perceive themselves as controllers of their own universe, more so than the average kid, more so than the average adult even. And it's a mismatch, right? Which obviously can create depression or anxiety. So you can see how this snowball goes down the hill, right? I'm not drawing conclusions out of a hat. Hopefully you can notice how we're working on this line of thinking. And I want you to notice that when you're just controlling the environment, you are not teaching your child how to tolerate those overstimulating environments. So there has to be a balance of moving through that level of accepting your child that they're sensitive and they have the current skill set that they have, and moving them into stretching them out of their comfort zone and helping them tolerate even more uncomfortable things within pacing that's healthy for them, safe, where they feel safe in that pacing and that guidance and that leadership. And then they're not fostered to be stagnant or treated like they're fragile. So like I said, go ahead and declutter before the holiday season. I'm not telling you not to. I definitely do that in my house. Definitely teach my clients to do the same thing without, you don't have to go so far as like KonMari the thing or whatever. But, or no, that's the wrong word. Marie Kondo? I don't know. Clearly you can tell that's not my cup of tea. But to go that extreme, however, what I will tell you is that your child also needs to know how to organize. They also need to know how to mentally tune out the environment and narrow their focus healthily to the task at hand. That will reduce their desire for procrastination. It will reduce their desire for dopamine seeking through screen time. It will reduce their capacity to check out and escape into other alternative realities, like reading too much when they're not doing other work, or they're not taking care of the responsibilities, or they're not engaging in friendships. And it will also help them be more resilient in and dissipate emotion during the day, whether that be at school, because you can't control the clutter in this classroom, Or like I said in the example, at a carnival or something, where you don't end up with a meltdown at the end of the day or the next day when their brain finally registers, whew, that was a lot, right? So the objective is to teach your child how to dissipate the emotional intensity throughout their day, so that they're not carrying everything from the day, and then at home, sibling Johnny takes your kiddo's toy, and then we have a giant explosion that is a mismatch to the circumstance at hand, where the environment compounds the issue, right? So we've noticed, what do we need to do to fix it? We also need to pay attention to playfully teaching your child, so that you're not just coaching your kid and trying to be their therapist. You do not need to learn how to be a therapist or get a second master's degree to parent your sensitive kid. You do need to connect to your general capacity for play that every human being has, in order to help captivate your child's curiosity, support them in feeling capable and in control, and then also serve them to communicate more effectively, because play is the child's language. And when you learn those skills, then your child can tolerate stress even in a messy environment. So we're going to work on one thing to kind of reduce the intensity for now, and then we're going to work on creating safe and effective habits without falling into extremes and have to just countlessly remove stuff from the house. Because your kid won't notice how to do that when they get into adulthood if you're not pointedly teaching them how to do that, nor will they notice how important it is if they don't know how to advocate for their emotions, if they can't manage their emotions, if they don't have the insight to notice that their emotions are impacted by clutter either. So those are the layers to this matter. I said I was going to be short, but look at this, I'm at a half an hour. So hopefully it was enough for you to get your wheels turning over this holiday season, and also to really get inspired to observe what limits do you want to set with your family this season. Maybe you ask for less toys, more experiences, for example, this holiday season, and accumulate less stuff overall, and start to offer that as an alternative to gift giving for family members who might be asking this Thanksgiving if you're in the U.S. All right. So if you want to learn more about the process that it takes to stop the meltdown cycle, to really eliminate the daily meltdown pattern in your household, and to do that in as little as 8 weeks, then I encourage you to go over to meganthompsoncoaching.com/3mistakes. And that's the number 3, the word mistakes, and learn more about what it takes to truly stop the cycle in your house, how to not get tripped up where most parents tend to, and then also what it looks like to work with our team. We dive into that more specifically on that training. All right. Okay. Well, have a wonderful week, and we will speak to you soon. Bye.